Center of Pioneer Valley. And we're really thrilled that you could come tonight to hear James Baraz speak on joy. This event is sponsored by both our Meditation Center and by Smith College Religious Studies Department, so we feel a lot of gratitude to them for co-sponsoring the event and providing this beautiful venue for our evening. And for those of you who don't know, Insight PV, as we call it for short, is a non-residential little meditation center over in East Hampton in the old Eastworks building. And we have classes, one-day retreats, open sittings where you can just come and sit and stay and discuss afterwards if you want, and lots of other things. It's a great place to learn about practice if you don't already know about it, and to practice more if you already do. So, am I forgetting anything? I don't think so. I'm not supposed to introduce James. I'm supposed to introduce Adie, who's going to introduce James. But I do have to say one word, that James was my first meditation teacher ever in Yucca Valley back in 1984 when I was just a young one. I'm 24 years old, and he was great. Just really kind and very competent, and perhaps one of the reasons why I'm doing what I do today is because of James. And then I was just talking to a friend of mine here, and she says to me, James was my first meditation teacher. And I said, well, he was mine too, so who knows? Who else here? James may be their first meditation teacher, or an important one. So I'm really happy that he decided to come. And Adie BMAC, who's somewhere around here, there she is. Adie's one of the teachers over at Insight PV, and she is, we could say she's James' mentee, as we call them in programs I've been in. So he's one of her most important mentors, has been an incredible friend and support to her in her teaching. And so I'm sure it'll give her quite a bit of delight to be able to introduce him. Thank you, Adie. Seal ready. Quick.
Switch across.
Just a moment, please.
All right.
Okay. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Adie.
Hi, James. It is really such a thrill to welcome James to our Insight PV community. It's we've been planning this, and James is teaching at the Forest Refuge at the Insight Meditation Society in Barrie for the month, and so it just felt like the perfect opportunity to ask him to come here, and we just want to thank you so much again for being here tonight for this benefit for our really beloved center. So, yeah. On. I did make a few notes. Just to share a little bit with you in case you didn't get to read bios and such, James has been teaching meditation since 1978 and is a founding teacher of the Spirit Rock Meditation Center in California. He is widely known and deeply loved for his commitment to building community. And he has inspired literally thousands of students, really, thousands of students, through his internationally known course on awakening joy, which we will be hearing about this evening. James also launched the Community Dharma Leader Program, which I participated in, as did a couple of my other friends and colleagues here, Peggy Gillespie and Kim Weber, both also sharing Dharma at Insight PV. And this program actually has trained over 200 people to share the Dharma throughout the country and some other parts of the world, actually, in community-based centers just like ours in East Hampton. James is also the teacher and advisor to the Spirit Rock Family and Teen Program and the Kalyana Mitta Network, also known as the Spiritual Friends Network. He leads a very popular ongoing meditation class in Berkeley, and I've had the great joy also of sitting in on that with a couple of hundred people showing up actually each week. And he's on the International Advisory Board of the Buddhist Peace Fellowship. So here's where I get to just glow a little bit more personally. What doesn't necessarily get written up in bios about James, at least none that I've seen, is that he's also really widely known for walking the walk and talking the talk. He is kind, as Rebecca said, honest, loving, and possesses just the greatest integrity. And I've witnessed him many, many times in very large groups, leading, including, inquiring, and sharing in very profound ways, very challenging ways sometimes. And in my mind, he is the rare person who is dedicated to making everyone in the room shine. He never shies away from that and has just the greatest capacity for empowering whoever has the blessing of coming into contact with him. So in fact, I would say that empowering others and encouraging all of us to find the place inside that is joyful, that is true, and to really be free to live in our own true nature. I would say, in my experience of this very dear friend, my beloved teacher, that this is really one of his life's greatest missions. So, welcome.
I better be good. Thank you for that sweet introduction. I think I feel like it's for now. How's this? Is it okay? Well, it's really a delight to be here, to be with Adi and Rebecca and supporting the Pioneer Valley Insight community. It is true, I love to see communities come together and feel the blessing of Sangha community. And so it's a treat to be here with you. In fact, I'm curious, how many people are kind of part of the Pioneer Valley community, just Insight community? Okay, and I want to get a sense, who's pretty new to meditation? And I'm really glad that you're here. Don't be shy. Wonderful. Okay, just want to get a sense of how Buddhist I should be. So I think before I get into jumping into talking and having us interact together, I'd like to do a brief meditation, something that I do actually in the Joy course that was mentioned, which is this won't be a long meditation, but just kind of gathering the energy and getting in touch with our hearts. So you'll make it if you're new. You'll get through it just for a few moments. Let yourself relax. Know that you're alive. Know that you're in a body. A pretty amazing thing. Know that you're breathing. You might take a few deeper breaths and breathe in a calming energy. Let it fill your whole body. And as you breathe out, let go. A sense of ease and release. Let go of the day. few moments will end the quiet time, but I invite you before we do to think of some blessing in your life right now. Something that feels like a blessing, a feeling of gratitude, and open the heart with appreciation as you reflect on that blessing. And with that same open-hearted attitude, just open your heart and your mind to this evening together, and be open and willing to let whatever nourishment, whatever increased well-being that could be available for us coming here together, have the intention to let this evening support you in that. Hi.
Hi.
Are we here?
Yeah.
Now, how is it if I sit down? Can you see okay? And please move up if you're feeling kind of distant or. Yeah, that could be fun. I might stand up. I might move around. But right now that I'm settled down, I'm sitting here. So, let's see. As Adi mentioned, I teach this course that I've been doing for the last 5 or 6 years now, called Awakening Joy. And it's a 10-month course. Anybody doing it right now? You can speak to those two. Is it okay? Oh, okay, good. All right. I didn't know. Good. And right now, it's just halfway through the 10 months. And by the way, if you want to join, you're welcome to. People do it, as I say, online, and I'll give you information on the website later on if you want. But I thought I'd condense 10 months into, like an hour and a half or so. I better talk fast. No. What I want to talk tonight about and share some practices is the path of Buddhism, or Buddha Dharma, as a path of happiness, and how that supports awakening our joy. The course, by the way, is not just for people who are steeped in Buddhist practices. It's actually now there's many more people who aren't practitioners. But it comes out of my gratitude for the Buddha's teachings. I wanted to talk a little bit about how it came to be, just in case you can relate to what I went through in my search for well-being, happiness, and joy. If you're familiar with the Buddha's teachings, then you know the first noble truth, there is suffering in life. And the Buddha brilliantly talked about the fact that there's suffering and there's an end of suffering. And it's very profound. Well, it's more than very profound. It's an amazing thing that the Buddha somehow figured out how to come to the highest happiness. But sometimes the emphasis can be on suffering. We hear about suffering and the end of suffering, the cause of suffering, and the cessation of suffering, and the path to the cessation of suffering. And sometimes Buddhist practice can get very serious. Anybody can relate to that? For me, Buddhist practice was my salvation. I was in a lot of suffering. And when I first heard the teachings from my teacher, who perhaps is a number of people's teacher here, Joseph Goldstein, in 1974, in Boulder, Colorado, at the Naropa Institute, that first summer, well, for the first few minutes, I was recommended I go to that class, and he didn't look very different from me. He sounded like he was from New York. He sounded like he was from Brooklyn. I was from Queens. He was just a couple of years older than me. He didn't fit my image of what a heavy-duty meditation spiritual figure would be like. And for about 10 minutes, I was just kind of judging, so this is the great meditation teacher. And then I just stopped and listened, and it was clear to me that he knew something that I wanted to know. Because the way he was and his whole way of being and what he was saying, it wasn't just the words that he was saying, it was just the way he carried himself and the conviction that he spoke with, that I was quite inspired by. And he said, or at least I heard, that it's possible to not be run by your neurotic thought patterns. I never entertained that before as an option, but because he said it with such conviction, I believed him, and I just went for it. So if you're somebody who has a lot of suffering in your life, actually that can be a great motivation for you to really find out where the end of suffering is. And the Buddha said, go for the highest happiness, and all the other happinesses will follow. It's also right in the Dalai Lama's beautiful book, The Art of Happiness, the purpose of life is to be happy. That's his opening line. It's a great way to open up a book, right? The purpose of life is to be happy. But I got caught for a period of getting very serious in my practice. Those first few years were incredibly opening and inspiring, but got stuck in a kind of grim space for a while. And I'll just backtrack. I remember when I first got into that first summer in Boulder. I'm a passionate kind of a person. Fortunately, I got passionate about something that cooled me out. But that first summer, I was a little bit concerned when one day I happened to be sitting in the class, and I had on my New York Knicks t-shirt, and I was a season ticket holder in Madison Square Garden. This is in their glory years, if you're old enough to remember, Walt Frazier and Bill Bradley and Willis Reed and all those guys. By the way, I was really rooting on Tuesday for the Celtics because this would have been the 7th game tonight. So come on, Celtics! Congratulations. But there I was in my Knicks t-shirt and saying, all of a sudden this horrible thought came to me, or unsettling thought. Am I going to go back to Madison Square Garden, the scene of some of my peak experiences, and I actually, this thought disturbed me so much that I went up. It was the first time I spoke to Joseph. I finally got mustered the courage to speak to Joseph. It was this kind of walking on air kind of guy by the time the class had gotten into a few sessions. And I said, look, I'm a season ticket holder. Madison Square Garden. Am I going to go into the garden and be watching the game and say, nice shot, Frazier. Good pass, Havlicek. Because I wasn't ready for it if that was it. And as he usually has through the years, always came out with the perfect answer. He said, don't worry, you're not going to lose your enthusiasm. If anything, you'll get over a loss a little bit sooner. Okay, all right, I'll sign on. So I really went for it, as I said, but I got into this space for a while where it just seemed so serious. There you are meditating, and it is, profound, and you also kind of look kind of cool and very deep and spiritual. And I better sit here. I somehow lost my joy, because I do love life. I don't know how Buddhist that sounds, but I do love life, and I'm grateful for it, and like to celebrate life. Oh, that's good. And it wasn't without reason, because I saw that actually I wasn't the only one. Once I saw what had happened to me, I went through a period for a while where I didn't know if it was okay to enjoy life. I remember practicing with one great master who said, ended each talk, may you speedily get escape from the world and get off the wheel of samsara and find nibbana. And although that sounded good on one end, I wasn't quite sure I was getting the message, or I was interpreting the message. It was kind of like I got confused and mixed up the end of suffering with the end of living. And without, there's some reason, there's some understanding, or I should say, it's not an accident that sometimes this misunderstanding can happen. And I want to read to you one quality of practice that's a healthy quality that can easily lead one to think that joy is not so Buddhist. This is the quality called samvega, S-A-M-V-E-G-A. The translation of which, and this is a healthy quality, the oppressive sense of shock, dismay, and alienation that comes with realizing the futility and meaninglessness of life as it's normally lived, a chastening sense of one's own complacency and foolishness in having let oneself live so blindly, and an anxious sense of urgency in trying to find a way out of the meaningless cycle. Whoa. You hear that, you say, what's going on there? Well, the operative phrase in that definition of this very wholesome attitude is realizing the futility and meaninglessness of life as it's normally lived. But one can kind of gloss over that and sit and think, oh, the meaninglessness and the futility of life, and let's get out of this meaningless cycle. So I got confused for a while, and it wasn't actually until I went to a really wonderful, inspiring teacher, a very important teacher in my life, who was not a Buddhist meditation teacher. He was an amazing Advaita teacher in India named Papaji. And he radiated this joy, and he talked about emptiness a lot. And if you're into Buddhist vocabulary, emptiness is a word that's used a lot. It's all empty. You see the emptiness of things, the emptiness of self, and it's a very profound word. But when Punjaji talked about emptiness, he was laughing and he was just having a grand time. And after asking him, I was there for a few weeks, so many questions, and he'd say, any more questions? And I'd say, well, I have one. Give me all your questions, all your questions. And finally, the last, at the very end, the most important question came out of me. I didn't realize, but here it was bubbling up. And I said, Punjaji, when Buddhist teachers, and I was a Buddhist teacher by then, when Buddhists talk about emptiness, there's such a solemnity, such a seriousness about the word. When you talk about emptiness, you're just having a grand time and you're so alive. Why is your emptiness so much more fun than mine, than ours? And he made the point, he said, when you're so moved by meditation, when you've discovered some real peace in meditation, it can seem that connection between stillness and emptiness is really, they are intimately connected. And then if you think of stillness and quiet as the place that one can really discover emptiness, then it's easy to think that anything outside of that stillness, I wonder if I could lower it. How's this? Can you still hear me? That something outside of that emptiness is not as profound. Let's see. So that it's not so profound, but he said, my emptiness, nothing is rejected from my emptiness. I'll do a little bit of a channeling of Punjaji. Nothing is rejected. There's happiness, and there's sorrow, and there's love, and there's confusion, and there's joy, and there's nothing is rejected from my emptiness. And he laughed. And it was a moment that was very profound for me, because I realized I made that mistake in thinking that you had to be very serious to be deep. And that emptiness, so maybe we'll just, how's this? Oh. No, listen. So it brought me back to myself, where I realized that I needed to come back to life. And actually, with him doing that, it made me look back and see where I had gone wrong. Because the Buddha was called the happy one. The Buddha talked about going for the highest happiness, and all the other happinesses would come. The Buddha talked about joy as one of the 7 factors of enlightenment. And in the teachings, one of the divine abodes, one of the sublime states, is joy. Many, many different words for different kinds of happiness. There's rapture, piti, and sukha, happiness and contentment. There's pamoja, gladness, lots of different ways that happiness is expressed. But somehow I had missed that. And so I started to investigate, and it really brought me back to not only looking at the teachings, but finding a richness of teachings about happiness. And because I saw that I wasn't alone, when I came back to myself and came alive again, I wanted to share it with others as well, because it's not such an uncommon thing. People that I'd work with on retreats could have that similar kind of wrong turn. And the more I looked, the more I could see the richness of the practice. Along the lines, well, a few years later, I came across a book. It was actually on my birthday that my wife gave me a book. This was in now 1999. I'd been talking about happiness for quite some time. Not only about it, but it was a very interesting topic, and I wanted to start writing a bit about it. And here, yeah. So my wife gave me a book called How We Choose to Be Happy by these 2 guys, Rick Foster and Greg Hicks, who've since become very good friends. The 9 choices of extremely happy people. Their secrets, their stories. And what these guys did was research for 3 years happy people. And they interviewed, they came up with about, I think it was 320 or so certifiably happy. And what they do, they go to a town, say in rural Alabama. You know, they travel all over the country, and some in Europe and some in Canada, I think Mexico too. And they go to a diner and they'd say, "Who's the happiest person in town?" And people in the diner would say, "Oh, Shirley, she's happy." And then they'd meet Shirley and they'd say, "Are you happy?" "Yeah, I'm pretty happy." And then they'd ask if they could interview somebody who, other people who might know her from another setting, like her family or her co-workers, and if everybody agreed, Shirley's a pretty happy person, they would give an in-depth interview seeing, "Why are you so happy?" And they distilled 9 common denominators of all of these happy people. And as I read the book, which is a fabulous book, it's the one book that I use for my course, all the choices had a correlation in Buddhist practice. And I thought, oh, this is really neat. What a great blueprint they wrote. And here it is, all of those principles and practices exist in Buddhist teaching. I decided to do an experiment. I just came across this book. I think it's pretty neat. I want to give a series of talks based on these different principles, but from a Buddhist perspective. They didn't know anything about Buddhism before. All they knew was that sometimes when they'd go on radio and somebody would call in and then they'd start off with, "I'm a Buddhist," that they'd almost always invariably say, "I don't trust all this happiness stuff. What about suffering?" That was the extent that they knew about Buddhism. Since they've taught at Spirit Rock a number of times since, and now they really appreciate Buddhism. But I said, we're going to take these principles and I'm going to just give a series of talks for my own benefit, looking at these principles and see not just the theory, but see if we can practice it together. So it wasn't just 1 week entertainment, a weekly entertainment. It was like, we're going to just check this out. If you want to do it with me. And over the course of the 3 months, we all got happier and happier and happier. Almost all. There was one person who just didn't want to be happy. I don't want to be happy. And, but she enjoyed complaining for 3 months. But everybody else, you know, pretty much, if they did it, it worked. And I thought, that's very far out. You know, Buddhism, they talk about practices. It's one thing to practice the stillness on the cushion, but we can actually practice developing joy in our life. And that was the start of this, not only the writing, but eventually doing this course. So I want to explain 3 main principles that I've come up with, kind of picked from Buddhist teachings, and then we can go through a few things together. So hopefully you get your money's worth, and just see for yourself. So the first, as I looked in the Buddha's teachings, first I was struck by his teaching on wise effort, or right effort, which has a few different components. There, in classical definition of wise effort, there is guarding against unwholesome states. You don't want to put yourself in harm's way, or temptation's way, or put yourself in a situation where you're apt to lose it or do some things that don't really support your well-being. He said, you know, don't go there. It's one. There's, if unwholesome states have arisen, to learn ways to overcome them. I mean, much of Buddhist practice is about using mindfulness and loving kindness and other kinds of practices for when you're really confused and caught. There are ways to come to the end of that suffering. That's the 2 on the unwholesome side. And then there's 2 on the wholesome side, which is developing wholesome states that haven't yet arisen. Okay, so you're just kind of going on your way. Gee, wouldn't it be nice to feel good? Well, you can practice loving kindness, you can practice mindfulness meditation or compassion meditation or equanimity meditation, and cultivate those states even if they aren't here initially. So developing wholesome states, and then the 4th of the wise efforts is maintaining and increasing wholesome states that have arisen. That is, if you're feeling good, if you're feeling wholesome, by wholesome meaning healthy states that lead to well-being, that it's a good thing to maintain them and increase them. Well, that's interesting. Now you might think, well, isn't that attachment? No, he's saying it's a good thing not to grasp on, oh, I hope it doesn't go, or how do I keep it here? It's just, there are ways to invite the wholesome state to keep on flowering and blooming. So that's the first, developing and increasing wholesome states. Okay, well that sounds good. Then there's, in another discourse, where he said, connected with wholesome states, these healthy states of mind and heart, there's a feeling of gladness that accompanies them. And he gives the illustration. He says, suppose you feel like being generous with somebody. It's just kind of coming through, and it's a random act of kindness, a random act of generosity. He didn't talk about random act of generosity. He said, in the middle of a generous act, one should think thus. This is from the discourse. I am generous. He said, this is a good thing. If you think and reflect, oh, I'm being generous right now. He said, there is a gladness that's connected with that wholesome state. That gladness, one gains inspiration in the meaning, inspiration in the Dharma, one gladdens the heart, and that gladness connected with what is wholesome, he said, I call an equipment of mind to overcome ill will and hostility. So, you might think, well, how can you say I'm being generous and not get puffed out about it, you know? He's not saying, hey, everybody see how generous I am? You know, I'm a pretty generous guy. That just creates more of a sense of self and ego. But what he is saying is when a quality of generosity just moves through you, you're moved to be generous, feel how good that feels. Just feel how it feels from the inside. Oh, it feels so good to be generous. You don't have to take ownership of it and say, oh, look at me. It's like, oh, how good that feels. And he says, pay attention to that. And that's where you can maintain and increase that wholesome state. So that was the second principle, okay? Increase wholesome, develop and increase wholesome states. And notice the gladness that accompanies them. That gladness is what I'm calling joy. And he also said, in another discourse, very simple, straightforward teaching. See how this sits with you. Whatever one frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of your mind. Can you argue with that? Whatever the practitioner frequently thinks and ponders upon will become the inclination of their mind. Well, neuroscience is showing this over and over now. We used to think that the brain was kind of set, but now we know about the neuroplasticity of the brain, and as you keep on developing neural pathways, if you are stuck in frequently thinking and pondering upon how bad things will be and worry about them, or how the world isn't good to you, that will be the neural rut that your mind is in. And if you frequently think and ponder upon how blessed you are, how people in your life are so worthy of your love, and how you want to share your good fortune, that neural pathway will be the groove that you develop. So the Buddha was talking about this a long time ago. As you practice a particular habit, it becomes more and more where your mind naturally goes. So as I was going through all these principles, that became the kind of key component of this quality of awakening joy. One, to develop and maintain, increase wholesome states. Two, to feel the gladness associated with them. And over time, if you frequently think and ponder upon them and practice them, that becomes your default setting. It's like you shift your default setting of your heart as you practice. So all of these different themes, say, that I do in the course are just developing different wholesome states. It doesn't matter which one you do. It's just, it helps to kind of shift around and make it fresh. Whenever wholesome state you're developing, the key is to really be present for it. Now, I just want to say a thing about happiness, wholesome state versus unwholesome state. because it's crucial to see what really, where real happiness lies. Now this is something that we can get deceived left and right by, because everything conspires in our culture, even 2,500 years ago, but in our culture, there's such a calculated indoctrination to make you think that happiness lies in places that it doesn't. In fact, that was what made the Buddha, motivated the Buddha to teach in the first place after he was enlightened. Perhaps you're familiar with this. He saw that after his mind became free, he looked around and he saw that everybody wants to be happy, and most everybody is doing exactly the things that are leading towards more suffering. They just don't know it. Isn't that? It's so interesting how the game is set up that way. It's like this big secret, you know. Oh, this is going to make me happy, and it doesn't. We get caught. And I want to share with you, actually, here, just to show you the conditioning we're up against now, 2,500, almost 2,600 years later. This is an ad that a friend gave me a while ago called "The Gold Shivers." Right? This beautiful woman draped in gold. Here's the ad. It's a 2-page ad. You'll get to see her in a moment. Okay? The gold shivers, that electric excitement, that thrilling warmth. Every new piece of gold jewelry ignites it once again. Nothing makes you feel as good as gold. Second page. What is the real substance of a new piece of gold jewelry? Emotion, pure and powerful. From the first small shiver of excitement when a shimmering necklace of gold beads catches a woman's eye, to the great shivers of delight when the coveted object actually becomes hers. Among life's pleasures, count this deeply felt euphoria as unique. The only way to get the gold shivers is by getting the gold. This is what we're up against. And according to one study by this guy, Holly Lassen, I think it is, who wrote Culture Jam, the average American gets 3,000 messages every day saying, this will make you happy, this will make you happy. So have some compassion for yourself if you find there's a little grasping in your mind. The radical thing is to see where happiness really lies. So, let's see. So, you might realize that happiness doesn't lie in the gold shivers, but it's hard to break that habit, and even harder to cultivate an ongoing new direction in one's life unless there's a really strong commitment to overcome that kind of conditioning. So now we'll start to do a few of the practices. So the first practice, what's called for, what starts the whole process going, which is also the first choice in the book, how we choose to be happy. That's what really struck me, because it just started out with exactly what the Buddha said, how change happens, and that is intention. Nothing happens unless we have an intention to go in a certain direction. Intention is the basis of all karma, as the Buddha said. Intending is karma, by intending we create karma through body, speech, and mind. And in every moment we are creating our reality by our intention. In order to shift that conditioning, we have to really get clear on what our intention is. Get clear first on where happiness lies, and then on actually going for it. Now, you might think this is, a really, you have to be a deep Buddhist practitioner to shift, but all it takes is a moment of changing one's course. And in fact, let's see. So I'll read one story from How We Choose to Be Happy. It's filled with people, who aren't born with a silver spoon in their mouth, and actually it's people who made that choice to be happy, often from very difficult circumstances. I'll read this one, I really like it. As one of our first interviewees, Adele showed us early on that happy people don't necessarily live charmed lives. In 1991, she experienced an unusually tragic set of losses. Her life unraveled as the losses began to pile up. This is her talking. In one horrible 24-month period, my life evaporated. I lost everything. My house burned down to the ground. That was in the Oakland fire, leaving me with nothing. No clothes, photos, furniture, no material reminder of my previous life. During that time, both of my parents died unexpectedly. My husband left me for a younger woman at the same time that my restaurant went bankrupt. My best friend moved to Seattle. Even the dog died. You almost have to laugh. It's like, oh my God, it's real. Everything in Adele's life disappeared, and she had to make a decision about how to go on. But without establishing some form of intention, she'd be immobilized. What were her intentions? And having lost everything, she explored the most fundamental of them. Would she live or die? This is her talking again. I had nothing. I was so filled with grief, I thought maybe God was somehow preparing me to die. Everything was gone. Maybe this was some monumental lesson in letting go, and that I should let my life go too. But as my initial shock began to clear, a feeling that I wanted to live outweighed all of my thoughts about death. I began to see there was hope among the ashes. There was one big opportunity. I had a clean slate. As long as I had to start over and create a whole new life, I was going to create a happy one. I wanted to feel whole. I was sure that I wanted to embrace everything in life, the good and the bad. I wanted a feeling of contentment and to feel rested and gentle. I wanted to feel unafraid, to feel I could handle anything that came my way. And I wanted to feel this way for the rest of my life. In spite of my grief, I could see that this all added up to happiness for a lifetime. She didn't just snap her fingers and then was fine. It talks about the process she had. You have to go through a whole lot of grief, and she talks about it later on, all the pain and the loss, but she was clear she wanted to go for happiness. And she was one of these amazingly radiant beings that they said, you belong in our book. It's not ever too late. And perhaps you know somebody in your life, or people who've gone through real challenges and suffering, who have somehow come out the other end and